Um, so we're going to start talking about different types of bones, and when I say different types of bones, in this case I talk about different strengths of bone. These different types of bones can be in the same bone, and in fact they are in the same bone. If you look at the top of this picture right here, here is an example of a flat bone. This happens to be, I think, the parietal bone, probably the parietal bone, and that parietal bone, and in generally the flat bones here are basically a sandwich here. There's compact bone or strong bone on one end, strong bone on the other end, and then in between there's this stuff called spongy bone. So this spongy bone looks like this, and all the name says spongy, sounds like it's spongy. It's not that it's completely weak. It's not that like you can put your finger through it or anything like that. It is fundamentally different than compact bone. So the major structure of spongy bone is that these have these things called trabeculae, which is spelled up there in the upper left-hand corner there, and these little rods that grow in very complicated fashion, and there's spaces in between. So there's these complicated fashions right here. So these are individual trabeculae, and those trabeculae are covered by something called, we've already seen the endosteum. So the endosteum is this layer of cells, and we'll talk about what those cells are doing in a little bit. Those are a layer of cells, and they basically help build the bone. And what they do is they go around in circles. So when you're really, really little, you start making it. You make this a little bit. So you start right here, make one little row, and then another, and then another, and then another. And if you look at this looks a little bit like a Target sign, or Target the store sign, or just a Target, right? We're going to see this again in a little bit, but these areas right here, where there's these individual cells that are surrounded. Those areas that are surrounded here are still lacunae. They're not labeled there, but they're lacunae. These cells in there are called osteocytes. So now the cells here are osteocytes. The cells on the outside are one of two varieties. There's either osteoblasts or osteoclasts. So if they're osteoblasts, these are all osteoblasts. They're making new bone. In this case, they're new spongy bone. And this part right here, osteoclasts, they're consuming bone. They're breaking it down. So if you think about it right here, if you wanted to build new bone, then you would allow for the osteoblast to be building. And if you wanted to consume bone, and you wanted to make this space right here, this space right there, if you want to make that space, then you need the osteoclast to do the activity. Because if you don't, then you're going to have, you won't have any spaces. So one of the things that the spongy bone does, that space provides an area for marrow, and it provides a space for hematopoiesis and red blood cell, white blood cell thrombocyte production. It also allows for the integrity of the bone to be strong enough, but it's not so strong that it makes it too heavy. Right? So there's a balance between strength versus weight. If you have it too strong, then it's going to be too heavy and too much to maintain. So that's what this does, the spongy bone. It acts like scaffolding. These rods or plates basically help the strength between these two layers of compact bone. So if you look at this picture right here, this is a picture of the proximal epiphysis of the femur. I'm not worried about the lines of stress, but what I am worried about is what are these spaces right here, or what are these little lines right here? Those little lines are called trabeculae. So this is all areas where there's spongy bone. Spongy bone tends to be in the epiphyses, and as you get closer and closer to the diaphysis, as you get further and further down here, this area right here is a fundamentally different portion of the bone. So this area where my pointer is, in that lower right-hand corner, is different than in the upper portion of the picture. The upper portion is spongy bone. The area where I'm pointing is called compact bone. Compact bone is largely looks like a target sign that is the functional unit of which is called an osteon. The osteon is right here, and I meant to put this vocabulary in my drawing and I forgot. So an osteon, or the Herversian system, but the term that I'll use is osteon. It has a series of progressively wider and wider layers, and those layers are started at a center. And that center is called a canal. It's called a central canal. And that central canal is then, it builds a little layer around it, and then another layer, and another layer, and as you get those bigger and bigger layers here, you get the osteon bigger and bigger. As you add additional layers here, you start enclosing old osteoblasts, and when you enclose that old osteoblast, you then make an osteocyte. You want to feed that osteocyte, you want to keep it alive. You okay with that?
Don't be embarrassed, Alan.
Yeah, I won't make you embarrassed. You know what I did one time? So this is a long time ago. This is like back when we had cool phones were flip phones. I had an old Nokia phone. So this was before you guys were born. My son would pick it up and go, ah, ah, ah. He was like 2 years old. Ah! And he would go like this and throw it down on the ground.
Oh my.
Nokia phones were bricks. You couldn't break them, right? So my students, I was in Boston, my students would say, why don't you get a new phone? I was like, why? This thing, he's not gonna break it. But anyway, so I used to tell them, don't put your phone out, just like I tell you, don't put your phone out, don't answer your phone. There's like 150 students in the class. Kid gets a phone call. I run up, I go, answer the phone. And he's like, no. I said, no, I'm not kidding, answer the phone. And he answers it, oh, and I said, actually, what's your name? And
He's gonna get in trouble.
forget the kid's name. Let me see it. Oh, hey, how you doing? And I knew the kid, because his brother is his older brother from, he was at the guitar. So now I'm talking to him. He's embarrassed as hell. So then I put it down and said, you don't want to do that again, did you? And by the way, if anyone else does that, then I'm just going to kick you out. Okay? So I'm embarrassed the hell out of it. And I don't want to do that to you guys. Well, answer just you. No. All right, I digress. But that was 150 students, and he didn't know a lot of people, and he was really impressed. Needless to say, everyone in that room was like, oh, I'm not doing that again. I'm not putting my phone on. The structure of this osteon here is really important. It's really sort of simple to see, and it's also really simple to draw. It's also simple to see in the microscopic. The functional unit of this compact bone is an osteon. There's superficial, or proximally and distally, there's going to be compact spongy bone, and the osteon has these compressively larger and larger layers there, and those layers are called lamellae. Here, these lamellae, as you make that outer layer bigger, a little bit bigger, that additional layer is called a lamellae. Individual spaces within the lamellae